I never meant to open the glove compartment. I just wanted to sell the car. The payments were overdue again, and the bank had started calling every other day. That morning, with the sky in Seattle smeared in shades of wet gray and the air thick with that lingering dampness after rain, I stood in front of Michael's old sedan and told myself it's just a car. But the moment I reached for the handle, my hand trembled. It had been 32 days since he died. 32 days since the hospital called and used words like aneurysm and no time to respond. 32 days of Lily not saying more than 10 words to me unless it was about school or groceries. And even those words felt like fragments, like pieces from another version of our lives that no longer fit. That morning, I found myself alone in the kitchen, stirring cold tea with a spoon too loudly. The clink against ceramic used to annoy Michael. Now, it filled the silence like a ghost of our old quarrels. The family photo still sat by the window, Michael smiling with his arms around me, and Lily, taken last summer in Cannon Beach. We looked happy in it, real, and I wondered when exactly the illusion had begun. "Breakfast is ready," I called up the stairs. I knew Lily wouldn't answer. Her bedroom door thudded shut minutes ago, the sound sharp and final. 17 is hard, grieving at 17 is brutal. But watching your daughter turn into a stranger is something else entirely. The car sat at the far end of the driveway, speckled with pollen and streaks of grime, like it hadn't been touched since the funeral. Michael used to wash it every Sunday, polishing the hood until it gleamed. He believed a man's car said everything about him. I didn't care about that. I just wanted to be able to pay the gas bill. I took the spare keys from the kitchen drawer and walked out. It had started to drizzle again, that misty kind of Seattle rain that doesn't soak you, but sneaks under your skin anyway. I climbed into the driver's seat and closed the door. The air inside was stale, but unmistakably his. A mix of cedarwood, cologne, leather, and something else, something I couldn't name, but felt like memory. I reached toward the glove compartment, hesitating only for a second. The click sounded louder than I expected. Inside were the usual things: insurance papers, an old phone charger, sunglasses. I picked them out one by one, placing them neatly on the passenger seat. Then I saw it, a small, black USB drive wedged deep in the back corner. Plain, except for a tiny label with a handwritten letter, and I stared at it. Just a letter, just a piece of plastic. But something in me shifted. I felt it in my gut. This wasn't just a glove box anymore. It was the start of something I hadn't prepared for. I held the drive in my palm, rain tapping on the windshield, and suddenly I was no longer a widow cleaning out a car. I was a woman standing at the edge of a truth I never saw coming. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know what it was. I didn't plug it in right away. I just stood there in the kitchen, staring at the USB drive like it might explode if I touched it wrong. The letter, N, on the label was smudged, probably written in a rush. It wasn't Michael's handwriting. That was the first thing I noticed. His penmanship was always precise, like every letter marched in formation. This was rushed, personal. A name, maybe? I carried the drive upstairs to the study, Michael's study, though I'd avoided calling it that since he died. The room still smelled like him. Books on immigration law lined the shelves. A framed certificate from a refugee organization hung above the desk. That had always been his passion, helping displaced people find legal footing. He never talked about the details, just said, "I'm doing some good," and changed the subject. The screen lit up as I opened the laptop. My hands hovered over the keyboard. For a second, I imagined putting the drive away, pretending I never found it. But the moment had passed. The USB slid into the port with a click too loud in the quiet house. A folder appeared. No name, just a plain yellow icon. I opened it. Inside were dozens of files, letters, photos, PDFs labeled with codes, and numbers I didn't recognize. I clicked on the first document, and the words blinked into view. "Dear Michael, thank you again for agreeing to help. I honestly don't know what I would have done without you. Marina. I froze. Marina. That name didn't belong to my life. It didn't belong to Michael's either. Or at least, not the part of him I'd known. My stomach tightened. I opened another file. I'm so scared. Eli's fever hasn't gone down for days. I know I said I wouldn't ask again, but if you can help with the clinic, another. Eli asked about you again. He keeps saying he wants to fly kites like last time. He misses you and I do too. My mouth went dry. The cursor blinked at me like it was daring me to keep going. Photos came next. A woman with deep brown eyes and tired cheeks. A boy, maybe 7 or 8, light hair, warm smile. In some pictures, they stood alone. In others, Michael was with them, arms draped around them, laughing, smiling the way he used to smile with us. I backed away from the desk like it might burn me. My knees nearly gave out. I clutched the edge of the chair, breathing hard. Who was Marina? Who was the boy? Who had Michael been, really? I didn't hear the door open until it was too late. What are you doing? Lily's voice cut through the fog like a shard of glass. She stood in the doorway, her hoodie draped over pajama shorts, eyes puffy like she hadn't slept. Her gaze moved from the screen to the USB, then back to me. Are you spying on Dad? Her voice cracked. Lily, no, she snapped, stepping forward. You're going through his stuff like he was some criminal. He's dead, Mom. Can't you just let him be? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The weight of it all sat like stone on my chest. She turned on her heel. You're unbelievable. The door slammed behind her, and I was left staring at the screen, at a version of my husband I didn't recognize, a version that now lived in my daughter's anger and a stranger's eyes. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the rain whispering against the windows like it was trying to say something I couldn't quite hear. My mind ran in circles, names, dates, letters. The image of Michael's arms around that boy, the way he looked at him, the way he used to look at Lily. At dawn, I got up, made coffee, and went back to the study. I opened the folder again, slower this time, letting the reality settle. The files weren't random. The letters from Marina stretched across years, some tender, others practical. But one thing was consistent. The boy, Eli. His name came up in every message. I searched Michael's email accounts next. Most were locked, but one was still open. The inbox was empty, cleaned out. The USB must have been where he stored everything personal, everything separate. I checked the financial statements I'd ignored for weeks. I wasn't looking for numbers. I was looking for patterns. There they were. Transfers. Always on the 1st and the 15th of each month. Small amounts, just enough to fly under suspicion. But over time they added up. Thousands. All to the same account. The name listed wasn't Marina. Just initials, M.A. But I didn't need more than that. I copied the account number and pulled up the scanned documents from the USB. One of the PDFs contained a scanned rental agreement, a lease signed 3 years ago. The address jumped off the page. South Seattle, Rainier Valley, a neighborhood I rarely visited. I stared at the address for a long time. The last time I'd been to that part of the city, Lily was still in braces. We'd gone to an art exhibit near Columbia City, and Michael had insisted on taking the long way home to avoid traffic. Now, I realized maybe he hadn't been avoiding traffic at all. I didn't tell Lily I was leaving. She hadn't spoken to me since the night before. I left a note on the counter, just in case, and took the keys to my old Subaru. The streets were slick from the rain, the clouds heavy with more. Seattle always looked soft in the morning mist, like a watercolor left out in the weather too long. As I drove, I rehearsed what I might say. I'm his widow. No, I found your letters. Too aggressive. I just want to understand. Maybe that was closer to the truth. It took me 40 minutes to reach the address. A modest 2-story apartment complex nestled between a taqueria and a laundromat. The building had peeling paint and a rusted bike rack out front. But the small garden near the entrance was well kept, lavender and sage growing in narrow rows. I parked across the street and stayed in the car. I didn't know what I expected to see, but I saw them before I was ready. A woman stepping out of the building, grocery bags in hand, long dark hair tied back. Behind her, a boy with a backpack, bounding down the stairs, talking too fast for her to keep up. She laughed. I didn't need confirmation. It was them. She was Marina. And that boy was Eli. And even from a distance, I could see it in his face. The light hair, the slope of his nose, the way his mouth turned up when he smiled. He looked just like Michael. I should have gotten out of the car. I should have walked up and said something, anything. But I didn't. I just sat there, heart pounding against my ribs, fingers clenched around the steering like it was the only thing holding me together. Across the street, Marina adjusted her coat and nudged Eli forward. He bounced ahead, waving at someone near the corner. She followed, her steps quick and careful. They disappeared, and I stayed frozen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt this quiet kind of collapse, like something inside me had quietly caved in on itself without making a sound. By the time I got home, the sky had turned a deeper gray, and the house felt colder than I remembered. Lily wasn't in the kitchen. Her plate was still in the sink from last night. The note I left sat exactly where I'd put it, untouched. Her door was closed. I didn't knock. I didn't have the energy to fight again. Instead, I made tea and stared out the window. The tree in our backyard had started to change, its leaves tinged with gold and red, hanging heavy with the weight of an early autumn. I almost didn't notice the silence breaking behind me. I read everything. Lily's voice was soft, but sharp, like a whisper meant to wound. I turned and saw her standing by the staircase, holding the USB drive in her hand. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes swollen. She had been crying. I opened my mouth, but the words didn't come. "You found it in Dad's car, didn't you?" she asked. "The pictures, the letters, all of it." I nodded. "I didn't go looking," I said. I just wanted to clean it out before selling it. That's all." "Is it true?" Her voice cracked. "Did he have another family?" My throat tightened. "I don't know if it was a family, Lily. I don't know what it was." She shook her head slowly. "Don't lie to me. Not now." I stepped forward, but she pulled back. "You always hated how close I was to him," she said. "You were always so disappointed. In everything. In me. In him. And now that he's gone, you're digging through his secrets like it proves you were right all along." "That's not fair," I whispered. "I didn't want any of this." "But you kept reading." Her hand trembled. "You didn't stop." "No," I admitted, voice low. "I didn't." She swallowed hard, tears gathering again. "I hate this. I hate that he's not here to explain. I hate that I don't know who he was. And I hate you for showing me." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. She turned away. "I'm going to Grandma's." "Lily, no." She disappeared up the stairs, and I heard drawers opening, bags being filled. 10 minutes later, the door slammed shut. I didn't chase her. I just stood there, holding the mug of tea now gone cold, staring at the spot where she'd been, and wondering how many pieces a heart could break into before it stopped trying to hold anything at all. The next morning, I found myself back in Michael's study, surrounded by the life he left behind. His desk was still meticulously organized, like he'd only stepped away for a moment. The silence in that room was heavier than anywhere else in the house. I stood there, unsure of what I was looking for. Some kind of clarity, maybe. Some final sign. Then I remembered the USB folder, the document with a scanned letter, a line tucked at the bottom. All documents secured in safety deposit box. Key in right drawer, cufflink case. I moved slowly, almost afraid that if I opened the drawer, I'd find something I couldn't unsee. Inside, nestled beneath a stack of old receipts and clipped ties, was the wooden cufflink box I gave him for our 5th anniversary. When I lifted the lid, there it was. A small silver key with a numbered tag and the logo of a local bank downtown. I drove there without telling anyone, without really thinking. The man at the front desk recognized Michael's name immediately. Apparently, he'd been coming there for years. After a brief signature check and an awkward silence, he led me to a private vault room and left me alone with the deposit box. It wasn't locked with a code, just that simple key. Inside was a thick folder, 3 flash drives, and a sealed envelope marked with my name. My breath caught. I didn't open the folder first. I opened the letter. Michael's handwriting filled the page, firm, slanted, familiar, a little rushed, but unmistakably his. Emma, if you're reading this, it means something's happened. Maybe I'm gone. Maybe you found the drive or the files. Maybe you already know more than I ever managed to say. I don't know how much time I have, but I do know I owe you the truth. All of it. I made mistakes. I sat down. The words blurred for a moment, but I kept reading. He told me about Marina, how they'd met during a volunteer clinic for undocumented immigrants, how she was scared, alone, trying to protect her baby, how, during a period when her marriage had been cold and silent, he crossed the line. It wasn't a long affair, he said. It was just one night, a night that changed everything. I thought I could walk away, that I could forget, but I couldn't, not when I found out about Eli. I didn't tell you because I was afraid of losing you, losing Lily. I told myself I was protecting our family, but really I was protecting myself. He described how 3 years ago, Marina came back into his life, desperate, with Eli sick and facing deportation. He couldn't ignore them, couldn't let a child suffer. He helped with papers, medical bills, and yes, money. Quietly, regularly. I know I should have told you. I know this is too much to ask. But if you can find a way to forgive me, please look after them. Not Marina, she's strong. But Eli, he's just a boy. He didn't ask for any of this. And protect Lily. If anything I've done puts her at risk, shield her. Whatever it takes. Everything else, documents, names, accounts, is in the folder. I trust you, even if I didn't deserve to. Always yours. Michael, when I finished reading, I didn't cry. I just sat there, the letters shaking in my hands, feeling like every piece of my world had tilted slightly, and yet somehow, for the first time in weeks, I understood. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car outside the bank for a long time, watching the city pass me by. Somewhere nearby, a construction crew jackhammered the sidewalk. A man with a briefcase rushed past, muttering into his phone. Life moved forward, oblivious, unchanged, but I had just read a letter that split mine in two. When I got home, the house was quiet. Lily's room was still empty. My phone buzzed with a single text from my mother-in-law. She's here. Safe. Give her space. I stared at the screen for a while, then turned it face down on the counter. That evening, I opened the folder Michael had left behind. Names, contact logs, medical records. One document detailed his petition to help Marina apply for legal residency. Another, a birth certificate with Eli's name, listing Michael as the father. I thought about that little boy, Eli, and his mother, who now carried the burden of a life built on silence. What had Michael been to them? Savior? Secret? Ghost? The next morning, I drove back to Rainier Valley. I didn't call. I didn't warn her. I stood across the street again, this time clutching the envelope Michael had addressed to Marina. She answered the door on the second knock. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and for a moment neither of us moved. "You're Emma," she said softly. I nodded. "Yes." She looked behind me, as if expecting someone else. Her voice trembled. "Is Lily okay?" "She's with her grandmother." A pause. Then, "Would you like to come in?" Her apartment was small, tidy, and smelled faintly of lavender and something warm from the kitchen. I sat on the edge of the couch while she poured tea without asking, her hands graceful but tense. "I don't know what you've been told," she said carefully. but I never meant to destroy anything. I believe you, I said, and I meant it. I slid the envelope across the table. He left this for you. She didn't open it immediately. Her fingers traced the edge as if trying to absorb whatever message lay inside. I loved him, she whispered, eyes glistening. Not the way you did. Not with a house and a wedding ring. But he saved us. I let the words hang in the air. I could have argued, could have corrected her, but I didn't. What would have been the point? Eli thinks his father worked far away, she continued, that he was too busy to visit much, but that he cared. Inevalit? I just never explained. I nodded. And now, she asked, voice small, what happens now? I didn't have an answer, only that I saw a boy who looked like my husband, a woman who had carried too much alone, and a daughter who needed me to be more than angry and betrayed. So I said we figured out, slowly, kindly, for the children. She looked up, surprised. You don't have to do this, she said. No, I whispered, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. But someone does. And for the first time since Michael died, I didn't feel like I was breaking apart. I felt like I was beginning again, not from scratch, but from truth. Lily came home 3 days later. She didn't knock. She didn't text. I just heard the door open in the middle of the afternoon, followed by the shuffle of her sneakers on the tile and the heavy thud of her duffel bag hitting the floor. I was in the kitchen, slicing apples. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then her voice, flat and cautious, cut through the quiet. So, did you meet them? I didn't look up. Yes. She stepped closer. And it was complicated, I said, laying the knife down. But they're not monsters. Marina isn't the villain. She's just someone who made hard choices. Like your dad. Like me. She let out a bitter laugh. Choices. Right. I turned to her slowly. Lily, I know you're angry. No. I'm confused. I'm disgusted. I thought I knew who he was, Mom. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through it. He was my hero. And now, I don't know if he even wanted to be my dad, or if I was just the family he settled for. I took a breath, stepping toward her. Don't say that. Why not? Her eyes brimmed with tears. You're thinking it too. I shook my head. No, I'm heartbroken. But I don't think you were ever second. I think he was torn, and he made the worst possible decision. He hid instead of facing it. She crossed her arms, jaw tight. I don't want to meet that boy. I don't care who he is. You don't have to, I said gently. Not now. Maybe not ever. But I want you to understand something. I reached into the drawer and pulled out Michael's letter. The original. I held it out, and after a long pause, she took it. I don't need to read his excuses, she muttered. They're not excuses, I said. They're the truth. He didn't have the courage to tell us while he was alive. And maybe they're the only way we move forward. She stared at the envelope in her hands like it might catch fire. Then she walked past me and disappeared into her room. The door didn't slam this time. That night, I passed by her door on the way to bed. The light was still on. I hesitated, then kept walking. Some grief isn't ready to be touched. Some forgiveness can't be rushed. I didn't hear her cry, but I knew she was, and I didn't cry either. I just lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many versions of Michael had existed. The husband, the father, the man who held another child's hand while ours waited at home. And still, I missed him. God help me, I missed him. Not just the man I thought he was, but even the flawed, selfish one I now knew. Because even in his betrayal, he tried to leave us something softer than rage. The next morning, I sat by the window and wrote a letter of my own. Not to Michael, but to Eli. Dear Eli, you don't know me. Not really. Maybe your mother has mentioned my name, maybe not. That's okay. I'm not writing to confuse you or to claim anything from you. I'm writing because sometimes the adults around you make choices that leave children holding questions they never asked to carry. My name is Emma. I was married to your father, Michael. I don't know what he told you. Maybe you think he was a man too busy to be around. Or maybe you've always felt his absence and made peace with it. But the truth is he loved you, quietly, from a distance, in the only way he thought he could. That's not enough. It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't fair to my daughter, Lily, either. But here's what I need you to know. Your existence is not a mistake. You are not someone's secret. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a boy with a full laugh and a curious mind. A boy who loves science experiments and still sleeps with one leg outside the blanket. A boy who runs faster than his mother can keep up and who asks why more often than most people have answers. I know these things because I saw you once from across the street, and in that moment, I saw my husband smile in your face. It stopped me cold. I won't pretend this is easy. For any of us, my heart is still heavy with grief and betrayal. And Lily, she's still trying to understand why the man who taught her how to ride a bike had a whole other life she never knew about. But despite the weight of all that sadness, I want you to know something simple and honest. You are not to blame. You are loved. You deserve every good thing. One day, if you ever want to talk or ask questions, or just sit with someone who knew your father in a different way, I'll be here. Not as a replacement for anything, but maybe as a bridge. Until then, be kind to your mother. She's braver than most. And be kind to yourself, especially when the world feels confusing. With warmth, Emma, I folded the letter slowly, hands trembling, not from fear, but from something else. A release. A quiet exhale of something I'd been holding on to for far too long. I didn't mail it right away. I placed it in an envelope, addressed it, and tucked it into the top drawer of my desk. A part of me hoped Marina would find it one day, or that Eli would, years from now, and understand that while the truth hurt us, it didn't have to ruin us. Later that afternoon, Lily came into the kitchen. Her eyes were tired, her voice quiet. I read the letter, she said. I nodded. I don't forgive him yet. You don't have to, I replied. But I don't hate him either, she whispered, and for the first time her voice didn't shake. We stood there, side by side, the late sunlight slanting through the window, catching the dust in the air like falling stars. Healing didn't look like a grand declaration. It looked like standing still and not walking away. Autumn came slowly that year, the kind of fall where mornings held a gentle chill, and the trees seemed reluctant to let go of their leaves. I started baking again, small things like apple bread and blueberry muffins. The house smelled warm, like cinnamon and sugar and something almost like peace. Lily spent most of her days at school or in her room, but now and then, she'd drift into the kitchen and sit across from me. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't, but I noticed the silence between us had softened. One evening, I found her curled up on the couch, watching old home videos on her laptop. She didn't hide the screen when I walked in. It was a clip from her 10th birthday, Michael wearing a ridiculous party hat, holding the cake slightly off balance while she giggled behind cupped hands. He had frosting on his chin. I watched my past self reach forward and wipe it away. We were all laughing. I miss him, she murmured without looking up. I sat beside her. I do too. She leaned her head against my shoulder. It was the first time she'd done that since the funeral. Do you think he meant to fix it? She asked. I thought for a long moment. I think he was trying, in the only broken way he knew how. She nodded. That seemed enough for now. The next day, I got a message from Marina. Just a photo. It was Eli sitting at a science fair booth, grinning beside a poster about volcanoes. In his hands was a tiny papier-mâché mountain, clearly handmade, clearly his. The caption read, "He got second place. He wanted you to know." I stared at it for a long time, smiling through a fresh wave of tears. Later, I showed it to Lily. She studied the image for a beat too long. "He looks like Dad," she whispered. "I know." She didn't say anything else, but she didn't look away either. We didn't try to force anything. There were no promises, no timelines. Just space. Space to feel what we felt, without apology. Space to mourn and grow and shift. The kind of space that slowly, gently, allowed something else to take root. Not forgiveness, not exactly, but acceptance. And then, one cold Sunday morning, as I poured hot chocolate into two mismatched mugs, Lily asked, "Do you think he'd like to come over sometime? For dinner, maybe." The boy. My hand paused mid-pour. I looked up at her. She shrugged. "Just if he wants to." A quiet smile crept onto my face. "I think he might." She nodded and took a sip of her drink, eyes darting toward the window where frost patterned the glass. Outside, the leaves had finally begun to fall. Inside, something else was beginning to. Not a return to what we were, but the start of what we might become. The first time Eli came over, he wore a navy sweater 2 sizes too big and clutched a book to his chest like a shield. Marina stood behind him on the porch, giving me that nervous, polite smile of a mother trying not to overstep. Lily was the one who opened the door. They stared at each other for a moment, 2 teenagers with nothing in common, but everything tangled between them. "Hey," Lily said, voice low. "Hi," Eli replied, gripping the book tighter. There was a silence thick enough to stop time. Then, to my quiet surprise, Lily stepped aside. "You coming in or what?" And just like that, he did. Dinner was awkward. We kept it simple, spaghetti and garlic bread, something comforting. Marina and I sat at the far end of the table, letting the kids find their own rhythm. Eli barely touched his food. Lily kept sneaking glances at him, like she was studying a math problem that didn't quite add up. But when he mentioned that he loved physics, her eyes lit up. "That's my best subject," she said. "Really?" His voice cracked just slightly. "You like space stuff? Black holes, time dilation, all that." She twirled a strand of spaghetti. "I kind of want to be an astrophysicist." Eli blinked. "That's actually really cool." It wasn't much, but it was enough. After dinner, the kids went to the living room. I heard them talking, tentative at first, then with bursts of laughter that caught me off guard. Marina helped me wash the dishes, both of us moving in quiet rhythm. "You've raised a good girl," she said softly. "So have you." We didn't need to say more. There was a kind of peace between us now, not the kind that erased the past, but the kind that acknowledged it, nodded to it, and chose to move forward anyway. Before they left, Eli turned to me. "Thank you for the letter." I smiled. "You're welcome. And for tonight. It was nice." He hesitated, then, in a small voice, added, "Can I come again sometime?" I felt something warm unfold in my chest. Of course. Marina squeezed my hand before stepping out into the cold. I watched them go, a little boy and his mother, walking back into the night, but not into silence this time, not into shame. Later, as I was turning off the lights, Lily came to stand beside me at the front window. "He's okay," she said simply. I nodded. "He is." She leaned into my side, and we stood there like that for a while, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. No grand ending. No sweeping music. Just a porch light left on, 2 cups in the sink, and a home that had stretched wide enough to hold more than one truth, more than one kind of love. Because sometimes healing doesn't mean going back. It means building something entirely new and daring to let others in. Weeks passed, then months, and gradually what began as cautious visits became something quieter, more natural. Eli started coming by on Sundays, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit at the kitchen table while Lily did her homework and I folded laundry. He brought stories from school, science facts he'd memorized, and once, a wilted sunflower he'd tried to grow on his windowsill. It had barely survived the winter light, but he was proud of it anyway. "Next time I'll try basil," he said. "I'll help you," Lily offered. He looked surprised, but he nodded. They didn't talk much about Michael. Not to each other, not directly, but his absence was there in the room with us, like a shadow that no longer frightened anyone, only reminded us of where the light used to fall. Marina came sometimes too. At first, she stayed close to the door, always a little unsure, always ready to retreat. But then one afternoon, she brought over a tin of homemade tamales and a photo of Eli as a baby. We sat at the kitchen table, sipping cinnamon tea, while Lily asked cautious, curious questions. "He used to sleep on my chest," Marina said, smiling at the photo. "He'd curl up like a little bean, so warm I thought my heart might melt." I listened quietly, because the truth was, I never got to see Michael hold Eli. I never saw him be that father, but I could imagine it now, not to excuse the lies, but to accept the fullness of the man I had loved, the flawed, divided man, the one who had tried, in all the wrong ways, to do right by everyone. That spring, Lily asked if she and Eli could present a joint science project at the local community fair. They built a model of the solar system, painted each planet by hand, rigged tiny LED lights to mimic orbit paths. When they showed it off beneath the auditorium lights, I stood beside Marina in the back row, our hands brushing by accident. We didn't move them away. Afterward, Eli came running down the aisle with a red ribbon in hand, second place again. Lily trailed behind, cheeks flushed with pride. "I messed up the part about Jupiter's rotation speed," he groaned. "No one noticed," Lily said. "You were great." He grinned at her, and I swear it was the first time I saw something new in him, not just a resemblance to Michael, but a light all his own. That night, Lily came into my room. She sat on the edge of the bed, legs swinging like she was 10 years old again. "I don't think I'll ever stop being mad at Dad," she said. "I don't think you have to. But I'm glad Eli's here." My throat tightened. Me too. And in that moment, I realized something simple and powerful. We don't always get to choose how the story begins, but we can shape how it continues. We can choose grace. We can choose openness. We can choose family, even the kind born from fracture. She smiled as she handed me the plate and said, "Let me make it up to you." There were people everywhere, laughter in the background, and the smell of grilled meat floating through the air. But in that moment, all I could focus on was the pale pink shrimp sitting on the edge of the dish. I froze. I'm dangerously allergic to shellfish. One bite would have sent me to the ER, and I was pregnant. No one else knew yet, not even Daniel. But something about her smile made the back of my neck prickle. I looked down at the plate again, then back up at my sister-in-law, Brielle. She was still smiling, too brightly. I didn't eat the shrimp. Colton did. That moment, that plate, that smile, everything spiraled from there. But to understand what happened, I need to take you back. Back to when I first met her. I married Daniel 7 years ago. He was steady, soft-spoken, and the kind of man who didn't just listen, he heard. I loved everything about our marriage, except for one thing. His sister, Brielle. At first, I tried to see the best in her. She was charismatic, always the loudest in the room, and people naturally gravitated toward her. But it didn't take long before the mask slipped. Beneath the charm was someone territorial, manipulative, and deeply jealous of anyone who took her brother's attention. From the beginning, she made it her mission to remind me of every woman Daniel had ever dated. She'd casually drop their names into conversations when I was around, talking about how well they were doing, how she had coffee with one last week, how Daniel could have done so well with her if he hadn't rushed into things. She even once joked in front of his parents that she still thought he should have married her best friend instead of me. I laughed it off at the time. Daniel told her to stop. She didn't. Then came the Instagram obsession. She didn't follow me, but she was always the first to watch my stories. If a male friend from college left a comment, she'd send screenshots to Daniel with notes like, "You okay with this?" Or, "She's putting herself out there a little too much." We laughed about it, but it stung knowing she was always looking for cracks to wedge herself between us. The moment Daniel proposed, everything changed. His parents were thrilled. My family cried. Friends cheered. But Brielle sat still, arms crossed, lips tight. Then, without a word, she stood up and walked out of the party. Daniel followed her outside, only to come back later looking worn down. She says she's hurt, he told me. She thought she deserved to know before everyone else. Later that night, I received a message from her. It wasn't congratulatory. It was laced with passive-aggressive advice, how I should treat her brother, how I needed to remember. She'd always be the woman in his life first. It unsettled me. I didn't reply, and I knew that silence would offend her more than anything else. After that, she became colder, more calculated. She still involved herself in our wedding preparations, hovering at bridal showers and dress fittings. She criticized everything, from the floral colors to the centerpieces, under the guise of just being honest. She mocked my choices openly, once calling my table decor cheap in front of my future mother-in-law. That was the last straw. One afternoon, while standing in the reception hall with my dress clutched in one hand, I turned to her and said the words I had held back for too long. "You're not invited anymore. I can't take your constant cruelty." She gasped like I had slapped her, then stormed out. Daniel backed me up. So did his mother. Still, I felt shaken. Because I knew. Someone like Brielle doesn't just walk away. She waits. She plans. And I was right. She showed up to our wedding anyway in black. I had chosen soft pinks and ivory for the wedding, a garden celebration in late spring, delicate and light, everything I had dreamed of. But when Brielle walked in, it felt like a storm cloud had entered the room. She was dressed in a floor-length black gown, complete with a veil. A veil. She looked like she was mourning a death, not attending a wedding. And in her mind, maybe she was. Guests turned and stared. Some whispered. A few chuckled, thinking it was a misguided attempt at drama. But I saw the glint in her eyes. She was daring me to react, to ruin my own wedding by losing control. I didn't. I smiled. I let her linger like a shadow in the corner. Daniel's mother, Martha, tried to keep her distance, but I saw her jaw clench every time Brielle opened her mouth. She didn't stop at the dress. She floated around the reception like a ghost from some forgotten tragedy, telling people how sad she was to lose her brother, how hard it was to watch him replace her with someone else. She laughed bitterly during our first dance and made snide comments when I cut the cake. Daniel finally walked over to her table and said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "This ends now, Brielle. If you can't be here with joy, then leave." Still, she didn't. She just smiled and said, "I have every right to celebrate or grieve how I want." It was Daniel's father, Howard, who eventually stepped in. Calm but firm, he walked her to the edge of the garden and said something low in her ear. She didn't argue. She just turned, veil swaying behind her, and left. I thought that was the end. I really did. After the wedding, I gave birth to our son Lucas. He had Daniel's eyes and my mother's dimpled chin. Holding him felt like holding the future, something clean and untouchable. I didn't want Brielle anywhere near him. I told Daniel that clearly. At first, he resisted. "She's still family," he said. But after everything, he understood. He saw what I saw. Brielle wasn't just toxic. She was dangerous in ways we hadn't fully grasped yet. But then things changed, or so I thought. 2 years after our wedding, Brielle had a miscarriage. She had been dating a man named Colton, a kind man, quieter than she was, always looking at her like she was fire and he was just trying not to get burned. The miscarriage devastated her. She vanished from social media, stopped coming to family dinners, and when she did show up months later, she looked hollow. That's the only word I have for it. Hollow. Out of pity, I softened. I allowed her to visit Lucas. She'd sit with him in the living room, reading to him or building puzzles. And for a while, it seemed like the woman I'd feared had vanished. Even Daniel said so. "Maybe this humbled her," he whispered one night. I wanted to believe it, but it didn't take long before the old Brielle began to resurface. Subtle at first, offhand comments about how tired I looked, how messy the house was, how lucky I was that Daniel still found me attractive post-baby. Then more direct. She started bringing up her own struggles at every opportunity. Every visit became a monologue about her pain, her disappointments, her ex-friends, her unfair bosses. Everyone had wronged her. She was always the victim. Colton eventually proposed. I was surprised. We all were. And even more surprising, we weren't invited to the wedding. Daniel confronted her. Why are we not invited? Her answer stunned me. Because I don't want her ruining my day like I ruined hers, she said, looking me dead in the eye. I wore black, remember? I know how petty women can be. You might do the same. It was absurd. I had done nothing to her. Nothing. And yet somehow I had become the villain in her script. That night, Daniel sat me down and said, "This has gone too far." He was right, but we had no idea how much further she was willing to go. After that conversation, Daniel spoke with his parents. They were just as stunned, especially since they had been planning to pay for part of Brielle's wedding. But when they heard what she had said to us, accusing me of plotting revenge, of being some jealous monster, they were done. Martha said it flat out. If she wants to exclude her own brother over paranoia, she can pay for her wedding herself. And they meant it. No financial support, no attendance, nothing. That pushed Brielle into full meltdown. She called Daniel sobbing, saying I had turned the whole family against her. She accused me of manipulating everyone, of being so polished it's scary, like I was some kind of evil genius hiding behind soft smiles. Daniel didn't even try to reason with her. He just told her, "You've made your choices. Live with them." But in true Brielle fashion, she didn't stay angry for long. When she needed something, she knew how to play sweet. A week later, she called me directly. Her tone was softer, apologetic. She said she had been under stress, that planning a wedding was harder than she thought, that she just wanted peace. "I want my brother at my side," she said. "And you too. Your family." It sounded rehearsed, but I could hear the tremble behind it. And maybe, foolishly, I believed she meant it. I convinced Daniel to attend the wedding. "Let's just be done with the drama," I said. "Go. Be polite. Then leave." We went. It was fine. Normal. Maybe too normal. Brielle smiled too much. Colton looked strained. But there was no scene, no sabotage. I started to think maybe, just maybe, she was trying to change. 6 months later, she showed up at our doorstep with 2 suitcases and red-rimmed eyes. Colton had left her. She didn't give details, just that they'd been fighting, trying to have a baby, and it had all fallen apart. I didn't ask questions. I just told her she could stay a few nights upstairs. She moved in like she owned the space. And suddenly, every day was about her sadness, her resentment, her bad luck. She spoke like a woman the world had targeted. But beneath it, I sensed something sharper, something calculating. She began to observe me, not just casually, closely, asking where I was going, what I was doing, why I always left for the gym so early. I told her I liked to work out before the office. Sometimes I'd bring my work clothes with me to change after. No big deal. But she looked at me with this tight little smile, like she didn't believe a word of it. One night at dinner, my mother-in-law was telling a story about a friend who had divorced her husband after catching him cheating and walked away with half his assets. Brielle cut in. "Wait, Daniel. Did you and Lauren ever sign a prenup?" The table fell silent. I stared at her. Daniel just blinked. "No," he said. "We didn't. We both do well. We trust each other." Brielle laughed under her breath. "Brave," she muttered. "A lot of people get blindsided." I tried to ignore it, but then she looked right at me and said, "You do carry a lot of outfit changes, Lauren. Are you sure that gym of yours isn't just a cover?" Daniel's fork clattered onto his plate. I stood up. "Excuse me." She raised her eyebrows. "I'm just saying, as his sister, it's my job to protect him." Daniel slammed his napkin down. "Brielle, enough. You don't get to accuse my wife of cheating because you're unhappy in your own life." She flinched. And don't you ever question whether Lucas is my son again, he added, voice trembling. You're not a mother. And honestly, after today, I hope you never become one. Her mouth fell open. Everyone sat frozen. Then, without a word, Brielle stood up and stormed off down the hallway. That was the last time we spoke to her for over a year. Until Daniel's birthday. Until the plate. After that dinner, we cut her off completely. No calls. No visits. No updates. Martha and Howard understood. They had seen the shift in Daniel, usually calm and composed, now raw with anger and betrayal. She's crossed too many lines, Martha said, and no one disagreed. For a while, life was peaceful, quiet, and then, one late September afternoon, I found out I was pregnant again. It wasn't planned, but when I saw those 2 pink lines, something inside me stilled. It felt like life giving me another chance. Lucas was 5 now, curious, sensitive, always asking questions. I imagined him as a big brother, protective and sweet. Daniel was overjoyed. We both decided to keep it to ourselves until the right moment. That moment came during Daniel's birthday. His parents offered to throw a backyard party at their home in Boulder, complete with string lights, a catered lunch, and a homemade cake from his favorite bakery. We invited close friends, a few colleagues, and family. Everyone knew it would be special, but no one expected Brielle to show up. She wasn't invited. We didn't even know she was in town. But when she walked through the gate in a soft lavender dress, holding a bottle of wine and flashing a sheepish smile, my heart stopped. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened. She went straight to him, hugged him, whispered something in his ear. Then she turned to me. "Lauren," she said gently, "I'm so sorry for everything. I've been going to therapy. I'm not that person anymore." I nodded stiffly. She offered me nothing more. Just that smile. Martha pulled me aside and asked if I wanted her gone. "Say the word," she said. "I'll have Howard escort her out." But Daniel, ever the peacemaker, said no. "Let's not turn this into another war. If she causes trouble, we'll deal with it." So I watched her. All day. She laughed too loudly, asked too many questions, made small, harmless jokes that felt like probes. But nothing crossed the line. She even complimented the decorations. "The flowers are gorgeous," she said. "You always had good taste, Lauren." It was during lunch that she approached me with a plate. I had just sat down, hands resting on my belly, when she walked over with a paper plate stacked with grilled vegetables, pasta salad, and shrimp. "Thought I'd bring you something," she said, chipper. "Wanted to make up for the past. Congratulations, by the way." I stared at the shrimp. "I'm allergic," I said quietly. "Oh," she said, blinking. I didn't know. She did. She absolutely did. It was a topic that came up every time we ordered food as a family. I had been rushed to urgent care once because of accidental cross-contamination. She knew. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away. I was still staring at the plate when Colton walked by. "Mind if I take that?" he asked. "I'm starving and I love shrimp." I hesitated, then handed it to him. "Sure," I said, distracted. "I'll grab something else." He walked off, smiling, already digging in. 5 minutes later, he collapsed. It started with coughing, then gagging. He doubled over, his face flushing deep red. People screamed. Someone called 911. Daniel rushed over. So did Brielle. She knelt beside him, shouting his name, panic rising in her voice. Then she looked up, eyes blazing, and pointed at me. "What did you give him?" she demanded. "What was on that plate?" I couldn't speak. I just stood there, watching Colton writhe, thinking that was meant for me. That shrimp, that smile, that apology. I didn't know how, but I knew. Somewhere deep in my gut, I knew. She had poisoned the food, and she had handed it to me. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. Guests cleared a path as paramedics rushed through the backyard. Colton was barely conscious, his lips pale, his hands trembling. They loaded him onto the stretcher, while Brielle wept beside him, clutching his hand like a woman halfway through a tragedy She hadn't expected to be real. But I stood frozen, cold, silent. My mind raced through the last 30 minutes, like a surveillance reel. The shrimp, her voice, that too sweet smile. I had almost eaten it. My unborn child and I. We were supposed to be the ones on that stretcher, not Colton. The police showed up shortly after. It was standard, they said. Anytime food poisoning leads to hospitalization, an investigation is launched. They asked questions, took photos, collected plates. I watched from a distance as an officer slipped the plate into an evidence bag, carefully sealing it. My stomach turned, not from pregnancy this time, but from dread. Daniel stood beside me, arms crossed, face hard. When the officer asked who had prepared the food, I hesitated, then spoke clearly. Brielle brought it to me. I didn't eat it. Colton did. That night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Martha and Howard stayed with us. They couldn't go home. Not after what had happened on their lawn. No one said it aloud, but we all knew what it meant. That something intentional may have happened, and that Brielle was at the center of it. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment Colton asked for the plate. How easily I handed it to him. How that one action might have saved my life and cost him his health. I was shaking when I opened my phone and started typing. I poured out everything. What happened, what I saw, what I knew deep down. I posted it anonymously online, thinking maybe if I said it aloud, the fear would loosen its grip. By morning, there were hundreds of comments, then thousands. People said I wasn't crazy, that my instincts were right, that someone like Brielle didn't just make mistakes, she made choices, malicious ones, calculated ones. Daniel found me sitting on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to my chest. You didn't eat the food, he said gently. You're safe. The baby's safe. But I couldn't stop shaking. Colton isn't, I whispered. That was my plate. I gave it to him. What if? He knelt in front of me. You didn't know. You were trying to protect yourself. You weren't the one who poisoned it. We didn't talk to Brielle. She didn't call. But she stayed overnight at the hospital, refusing to leave Colton's side. The next day, Daniel met with his parents in the kitchen while I sat on the couch with Lucas, pretending everything was okay. It wasn't. My son looked up at me with his innocent eyes and asked, "Is Uncle Colton going to die?" I choked on my breath. No, sweetheart. He's strong. Later that night, I told Daniel the full truth, that I believed she had meant to poison me, that I had caught the shrimp instantly because of my allergy, but Colton hadn't known. I also reminded him she had prepared that exact plate, handed it to me herself. Nothing about that moment had been casual. Howard sat still for a long time, then finally said, "There are cameras." What? In the backyard. We have cameras facing the patio and garden. Installed them after last year's break-in. Daniel grabbed his father's phone, opened the security app, and pulled up the footage. We watched in silence. There it was, clear as day. Brielle approaching the buffet, selecting items, then carefully adding shrimp to a single plate, glancing over her shoulder, then walking directly toward me with it. No mistake, no accident, just intent. And now we had proof. Daniel didn't say a word after watching the video. He just stared at the screen, fists clenched, breathing shallow. The silence in the room was heavy, charged like the air before a thunderstorm. I didn't dare speak. Martha stood behind him, one hand over her mouth. Howard finally broke the silence. "We need to bring this to the police." I nodded. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. But I felt something else too, relief. It wasn't just my word anymore. It wasn't just a gut feeling or a mother's instinct. We had proof. Actual, indisputable proof that Brielle had prepared that plate and handed it directly to me. Daniel downloaded the footage, transferred it to a USB, and drove to the police station with his father. I stayed home with Martha and Lucas. Every time the front door creaked or a phone buzzed, my stomach jumped. I kept glancing at Lucas playing with his toy cars, wondering what I would have told him if I hadn't noticed the shrimp. What if Colton hadn't taken the plate? What if, when Daniel came home 2 hours later, he looked like a man who'd walked through fire? "They're taking it seriously," he said. "The officer said it's enough to start a formal investigation, especially with what happened to Colton." That same night, we got the toxicology report. Colton had been poisoned with a compound commonly found in rodenticides, rat poison. Traces were found in his bloodstream, and symptoms matched. I nearly collapsed when I heard it. It wasn't just food poisoning. It was attempted poisoning with intent to harm. Brielle was contacted for questioning the next morning. She didn't even try to deny it. According to the detective, she broke down almost immediately, cried, sobbed, said she hadn't meant for any of this to happen, claimed she was overwhelmed, emotional, that she just wanted Lauren to spend a night in the hospital, to teach her a lesson. She swore she didn't know I was pregnant, said she only used a small amount, that it was harmless in low doses. Her words, harmless. Colton filed charges the same day, and then he filed for divorce. Brielle called Martha from the holding cell, begging her to come. She said she was scared, alone, that she needed her parents, now more than ever. And then she dropped her final bombshell. She was pregnant. For a moment, Martha wavered. I saw it in her eyes, the way her face paled, her hands trembling as she held the phone. But Howard's voice came steady behind her. "She could have killed your grandchild. That was it. They didn't go. Daniel didn't either." Brielle stayed in holding until her bail hearing. No one from our family showed up. And when her court date arrived, everything came out. The camera footage, the toxicology report, her confession, her motive. The judge was stern but clear. Attempted poisoning, tampering with food, reckless endangerment. She had committed multiple offenses, and the fact that she was pregnant did not absolve her. The judge said her child's future would be determined later, but her actions had consequences now. She was sentenced to prison. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't want to see her cry. I didn't want to hear her excuses. But Daniel did. He said Brielle stood there, trembling, mascara running down her cheeks, and when the sentence was read, she whispered. I didn't think she'd give it to him. I didn't think she'd actually hand the plate to someone else. Like that made it better. Like attempted murder was okay as long as it hit the right target. She tried to shift the blame to me, even at the end. But the truth was clear. She didn't care who got hurt. So long as I paid the price. Brielle went to prison. There were no appeals, no last-minute reversals, just silence. Her sentence wasn't long by legal standards, but it was long enough to ensure distance, long enough to give all of us space to breathe. In the months that followed, we tried to settle back into life. Lucas asked questions, of course. Where did Aunt Brielle go? Is Uncle Colton okay now? We answered with gentle truths. She made a dangerous mistake, I said one night, tucking him into bed. And now she's facing the consequences. Colton recovered slowly but fully. When he was ready, he filed for divorce and moved to a new city. But he stayed in touch. That surprised me. I thought he'd want to forget everything, erase the nightmare, but instead he chose connection. He came to Lucas's birthday. He sent cards on holidays. He even came to visit when our second child was born. I still carried guilt from that afternoon, the way I had handed him the plate. But when I finally got the courage to say it aloud, he just shook his head. You saved yourself and your baby. That's what matters. Our daughter was born on a bright morning in March. We named her Grace, and that's exactly what she brought into our lives. Grace, after everything broken. The first time Daniel held her, he cried. Real, silent tears that he didn't wipe away. I didn't think I could feel joy like this again, he whispered. Not after everything. I understood. The trauma didn't leave us immediately. For weeks, I couldn't eat anything unless I'd made it myself. I double-checked every ingredient label. I flinched when someone handed me food at a gathering. My OB suggested therapy, and I said yes before she even finished the sentence. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night and imagine what could have happened if I hadn't noticed the shrimp, if I'd taken a bite without thinking, if I'd trusted the smile on her face instead of listening to the twist in my gut. It terrified me, but it also taught me something: how close danger can be, even when it's wrapped in family ties and forced smiles. Martha and Howard tried to reconcile their own grief. Their daughter was in prison. Their son had nearly lost his wife and unborn child, but they didn't shrink from it. They stood beside us, supported us, loved us harder. "We raised her," Martha said once, voice cracking. "We can't undo that, but we can choose who we stand with now." Brielle sent one letter from prison. It arrived 6 months after the sentencing. The handwriting was neat, controlled, the message short. She apologized, said she had been blinded by jealousy and hormones, that she hoped we could forgive her someday for the baby's sake. I didn't reply. Daniel didn't read it. We stored it away with the police report and court documents, tucked deep in a drawer we never opened. Some stories don't need epilogues. Some doors deserve to stay closed. Now, every evening, as the sun dips behind the mountains, Lucas reads to Grace on the porch swing. He's gentle with her, careful in ways that make my heart ache. And sometimes as I watch them, I think about how easily all of this could have been stolen. How one woman's bitterness almost burned down the life we built. But it didn't, because I said no, because I trusted my instinct, because this time I didn't try to keep the peace by staying quiet. And that changed everything.